morning, welcome to a very, very wet and cold Silverstone here for the second round of the FIA GT Championship. And you join us just a few laps into the race. We're looking now at the race leader, Bernd Schneider for Mercedes, the man who took pole at Hockenheim. He took pole again here at Silverstone, and Schneider absolutely carving through the field at the moment. Bernd Schneider there in the CLK GTR, leading the field, second place at the moment. Let's just have a look back though at the restart of this race just a few minutes ago. Here they were coming in to Woodcote for the last time after the rolling up lap. Big field, 47 cars taking the start, and Bernd Schneider immediately jumping into the start from the Paynos GTR of David Brabham. An amazing second fastest time in qualifying yesterday. David Brabham there tucking in behind Schneider. All sorts of problems. That is Emmanuel Collard going off in the Marlboro JB Racing Porsche Time 11 GT. And we are back now with the leader. So Schneider establishing a big lead already. We are at this moment on lap 6 of the race. He's leading from JJ Leto, from Alessandro Nannini, also on board the Mercedes, Peter Cox, John Nielsen, Frank Lagorce, Jan Lammers, Terry Boutsen for the factory Porsche, Pedro Lamy and David Brabham in the Paynos, now back into 10th place. Well, I'm joined today, delighted to be joined by David Leslie. David Leslie, course man who's racing for Nissan in the British Touring Car Championship this year. Also a man very experienced in sports car racing. David, good to have you on board.
Thank you very much indeed. It's just a pity about the weather here. We keep having bits of sunshine trying to break through, which making life very difficult for the teams, not knowing whether to be constantly on wets or whether changing tyres towards the slicks. But we've got the Mercedes out front on Bridgestone tyres. The majority of the field is actually running on Michelin tyres, and there are a few on Dunlop tyres. So tyres will play a very big part in this race, and I think you can see at the beginning that the lead has been stretched by Schneider with the tyres, the Bridgestone tyres in the wet, and I'm sure that as the race goes along things will change quite dramatically, and we'll see how it progresses through the race.
Well, we've been plagued throughout qualifying to somewhat off there, number 58, one of the GT2 cars. That, in fact, is Manuel Monteri in his Montero Porsche 911. He's in the gravel. They're going to get him back onto the track, I think. But, David, all the cars in this race this morning starting on wet tyres. A big shower, even as they're on the warming up lap. Bad news for Gulf McLaren. Should have had 3 cars in the race. They had to start this morning with only 2 after Jean-Marc Gounon had an enormous accident at Bridge Corner this morning. Absolutely destroyed the car. He's put himself in hospital, but fortunately only with first shock, and he's also having a quick check-up. They're saying he may be allowed back to the circuit later today. So Gulf McLaren already starting with 1 car down, but we're at the moment looking at the second place battle. JJ Leto, the man who won at Hockenheim, and chasing him at the moment, Alessandro Nannini. Now, we're just talking a moment ago about the tyre situation. They're on wets at the moment. It is driving out, David. It's sunshine, but more black clouds coming, as it has done all weekend.
Yes, it's rather confusing for the teams. They've had to qualify both in the wet and in the dry, and obviously the quickest times is there in the dry. So if you weren't out at the very beginning of practice and you didn't get out for that first 5 minutes when it was dry, then unfortunately you had to start further down the grid. But it's a problem for all the teams. They've really got to look at the sky. You need a bit of a glass bowl to be able to work out what you've got to do for the future. They've all started on wet tyres. Very wet when we started. The rain has come off at the moment and is drying out as we're talking all the time. But I've discovered, talking to some of the teams, that the cars do not work very well when it is still damp on slick tyres. So most of the teams will stay on their wets until there is a very positive dry line before they will come in and swap to their slick racing tyres. So I think for the foreseeable future we'll see them running around for quite some time on their wet tyres, slipping, sliding around.
Right, we're talking slipping, sliding around. It is a bit of an embarrassment, these conditions at the moment for the GT1 cars, and we're seeing at the moment that Philippe Gache in the Viper is already up to 15th overall in his GT2 car. This is the car that won Hockenheim. He's got Bruno Eichmann in the Rook Porsche in second in GT2 at the moment. Tommy Archer, who's driving of Justin Bell in third, and Jaro Nurminen, who's driving the Chamberlain Viper, is in 20th place. So 4 GT2 cars in the top 20 positions at the moment.
I think with the less power of the GT2 cars, they're able to get the cars a bit more nimbly around the corners, and it's because of these wet conditions that the GT2 cars are being able to make inroads into the GT1s and moving up the field. Something that would not have happened had it been dry. The extra power of the GT1s would have been able to simply drive away down the straight. But as the race goes along, if it stays wet, we will see hopefully the GT2s
So we've got a problem here for one of the Paynolds. This is the Dams car. This is Frank Lagorce on board the Dams car, and looking at the moment, the other Paynolds coming into the pits, they've got a problem as well. The number 5 car, that is David Brabham's car, which started from the front row of the grid. An amazing performance by a front-engine car against all these mid and rear-engine cars. How come this Paynolds has got so much speed, David?
Well, no one actually knows. At the end of the qualifying for Le Mans, he managed to put in such a fantastic time in qualifying, and in the very dying minutes of qualifying here at Silverstone, it managed to put itself on the front row. It was a bit of a shock to most people, because racing cars work best when they've got rear engines, and why this car works so well with a front engine, I'm not too sure. It's confusing everyone at the moment.
Well, we're just watching one of the Porsche back markers there, not in trouble. He's just being very gentlemanly, letting these fast GT1 cars through. Bernd Schneider still leading the race from JJ Leto, from Mercedes-man Nannini. Into the pits comes one of the GBF Benetton Lotuses. This car, number 23 car there, is the car of Mimmo Sciattarella. He's in very, very early. Are they making a change to tyres? They are indeed, David.
They are. They've obviously decided that it's time to change tyres onto slicks. They think that it's a bit warm. Here's the Mercedes just coming into the pits now. They've obviously decided as well that the circuit is drying sufficiently to change. It was obviously not planned to come in this early. It was probably about an hour. But with the leader now into the pits coming in, I would take it'll be a quick splash of fuel. Looking at the tyres that are about to going on, no, they're not rushing at this car for some reason. There's obviously a problem. They're talking to the driver at the moment. They have a quick splash of fuel. The rules state that we must fill the fuel first before any other work is done. More wet tyres going onto the car. So why this car came in before the first hour is up, we're not quite too sure at the moment. Maybe somebody in the pit lane can fill us in with the information. But they're doing the normal sort of routine work of cleaning the screen, brand new tyres, a splash of fuel, and I'm confused at the moment as to why it was actually in there.
Well, of course, this is going to change the shape of the race at the moment. Nannini is now in the lead. Schneider dropping down the order very fast. Nannini had Leto right in his tail. Leto now has dropped right down the order. Where's Leto gone to? We can't see at the moment. Maybe he's in the pits. He's dropped down to 6th place at the moment. Out of that second place battle with Nannini. Nannini leading after 9 laps from Bernd Schneider. That'll change in a moment though. From Peter Cox, from John Nielsen, Jan Lammers in the Lotus in a great 5th place at the moment. Bernd Schneider coming out of the pits very, very gingerly there. There is a pit lane speed limit, and a number of drivers fell foul of that over the weekend. $500 fines being thrown left, right and centre. Some times being disallowed, but generally everyone behaving themselves. There's the number 2 car picking up. This is John Nielsen in that beautiful Gulf McLaren. More back markers being monstered by the field. John Nielsen going through, the man at the moment in 4th place. We think that'll probably change to 3rd place in a moment when Schneider comes around next time. John Nielsen, a master of the wet. He just loves driving here. And of course, this is the man who has won at Silverstone. He won at Silverstone and at Monza. And in fact, very, very good performance by the Big Dane. He just loves these wet conditions. John, you've come up against David, you've come up against John, haven't you, in the past?
Yes, John's a bit like a Guerrero, really. He's one of these people that just does everything, and he will do the majority of this race. His teammate Thomas Buescher is one of the gentleman racers, and while he is a very quick driver, not quite up to the pace of John Nielsen, and John now having gone through and moved up into 2nd place, he will do the majority of this race like he does most of the races.
So there's confirmation. Alessandro Nannini leading at the moment. He has at the moment got 20 minutes of the race behind him, and he's leading from Nielsen indeed, and from Jan Lammers now up into 3rd place. So Jan Lammers in 3rd. Here's our 2nd place man just gone through. There is the leader at the moment. Now will Alessandro Nannini be following Bernd Schneider into the pits? He's on the same tyres. They both started on these Bridgestones. They're up against nearly all Michelin runners. Bridgestone, David, always very, very good in the wet. Developed in Japan, of course, and this is a really good day for them, a day like this.
Yes, Bridgestone have, when they get rain in Japan, it really does rain very, very hard. So they've worked a lot on their wet tyres. They're now moving into other categories of motorsport, and they're known for their wet tyre being that much better than their slick. Their slick is not slow, don't get me wrong, it's a very good tyre, but they are certainly capitalising on their performance in the wet conditions here at Silverstone, we can see Nannini now sliding around out there. It is obviously drying quite a lot, and the wet tyres are taking a bit of a hammering on the drying circuit. So there we have in the pit lane, we can see now some slick tyres waiting to go onto someone's car. Not exactly sure whose, we can't quite read the writing on it, but during the next few laps I'm sure that we'll see a number of cars coming into the pits, and the lead will change quite often as people are changing onto slick tyres. The GT2 Marcus there being overtaken by the Porsche. It's finding it very difficult to get past, eventually driving right round the outside and accelerating away down the straight. You can see the real difference in the power between the two different classes.
Well, Maribaldi at the wheel of the Conrad Porsche. This is the Conrad Porsche which was only delivered to the team 5 days before Le Mans pre-qualifying last weekend, so they've had very, very little time with the car. Kramer, incidentally, not here this weekend. They had a major water leak at Le Mans with their new 911 GT1 car. They haven't been able to make it. Great shame, because Kramer, always very, very popular front-running team. Their GT2 car is here in the hands of Thomas Saldana and Prince Alfonso, but a little bit down the order. That Marcos, incidentally, at the moment, Cor Oyser, we just saw on the screens a moment ago, he's dropped down again. He was up into 6th place in GT2. So Philippe Gache now to 11th overall. This is quite amazing. These early tyre stops changing the order of the GT1 front runners, and Philippe Gache, winner at Hockenheim for the Chrysler Viper team, in 11th place overall to lead GT2 from the Chamberlain Viper of Nurminen. So now we have behind us 11 laps of Silverstone. They're on the 12th lap, and it is still Alessandro Nannini leading now from Jan Lammers. Jan Lammers we're looking for at the moment. Is that Jan there? In the Lotus there, going through the picture at the moment, Jan Lammers in 2nd place, so he's closing on Nannini at the moment, just 5.2 seconds behind him on the last lap, but that gap is a lot closer now.
Yes, for some reason Lammers is really starting to take a lot of time out of the leader. I can only assume that Lammers has got some slightly different tyres on to the rest of them. Either he started with intermediates or he's changed very quickly or something, but he's certainly taking time out, because he certainly passed Nielsen, and to get past John, I must admit, is a major feat. He's got a very nice McLaren out there, and he can make it extremely wide when he wants to, but very quickly Jan came past and into 2nd place, and it's an absolutely superb race for the Lotus so far, and looking well.
Right, we are picking up at the moment. They're the GT2 leader. We just saw Philippe Gache in the Viper going through the picture. Here's the 2nd place man, Jan Lammers, in the number 14 Lotus there. What a great drive by Jan Lammers. Big problems all throughout qualifying. They just could not get to grips with the car. Jan had a bit of an off. So did a bigger off for his sister car of Giroir and Delatraz. And they finished up, in fact, on Saturday afternoon with only one rear body, which they had to share between the two cars. Jan went out, set his time, a very good time indeed in qualifying. He put that little car, the little Lotus, on 9th place on the grid amongst all these big fat Mercedes, Paynolses, Porsches and McLarens. But at the moment there is Jan, and looking at John Nielsen in 3rd place, he's closing a little bit, and Peter Cox in the BMW Motorsport McLaren also in the picture now. This is his 2nd, 3rd, no, 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th, all closing up together now. We've got a race on our hands after 13 laps, David.
This is a very long race of over 4 hours, and to have such excitement at the very beginning with the chopping and changing of tyres and into the pits that we weren't expecting. They're closing up now. The leader's still some 3.7 seconds ahead, but behind that we've got John Nielsen and Cox catching Lammers all the time. We can see them just going through the picture now on the slow corner at Abbey. Down through Bridge Corner goes Lammers, up towards Priory, and the Golf car following on.
I think we're looking for Nannini to go in the pits. I can see across the way from here that Mercedes AMG team are all ready with the tyres. Everyone's waiting there. The boss, Hans Werner Aufrecht of AMG, up on on the pit wall, waiting to see if his car's going to come in. Is this the moment they're going to come in? And Jan Lammers will again be leading a race. In he comes, indeed. In comes our race leader. Well, our new race leader is now Jan Lammers. So Lotus leading here at Silverstone. What a great day for the British team.
It's absolutely fantastic. I mean, they've worked very hard with this little car. They had some problems at the very beginning when it first started running, beginning of the year, and with a lot of testing, a lot of hard work, and especially this weekend, although they didn't start very well, they're having a fantastic race so far, and they're getting up there into first place. Looking at the Mercedes on the pit lane there, we can see some more tyres about to go on. Those look more like intermediates rather than slicks or the wets that were coming off. The fuel is now finished. Finishing the fuel up goes the car onto the air jacks. Ongoing the intermediate tyres. They've obviously decided that although it's drying, it's not drying sufficiently well to put on the slick tyres. So we can see that sometime in the future they will be back in again to put on some slick later, as long as it doesn't rain again.
David, just how effective are slicks in these sort of conditions? I think you were talking to Chris Goodwin this morning about the Parabolica McLaren, and what about these cars? Can you tell us a little bit about the problems of using slicks in these conditions?
Slicks are basically what look like bold tyres. They've got rubber all the way across. They're fantastic in the dry conditions. Unfortunately, in the wet conditions, they've got very little grip. And these GT cars here are working very badly with slick tyres on damp circuits. Speaking to Chris Goodwin earlier this morning, he said that it really has to be very dry before he puts on the slick racing tyres. So they will run a long time on wets before they change to slicks. Michelin, in fact, have three different types of slicks, 2 different types of rain tyre, and an intermediate tyre as well. So the teams not only have to worry about which ones to put on, but once they decide which ones, they then have to decide which type of slick or intermediate they want to put on. So it is very confusing, and it's become a very tactical game as we go through the afternoon.
Well, just a quick update then as we get now lap 13, we're on lap 14, 13 covered. Here's the race leader, and right behind him, second place battle now with Peter Cox going through on the inside of John Nielsen. So Peter Cox taking second place. It looks like it. There he is in second place from John Nielsen, and there a change of second place. So great battle up the front at the moment. Those top 3 cars are covered at the moment by just 1.9 seconds after 15 laps now of racing. We're on the 15th lap, and it's still Jan Lammers out front, and conditions drying out very quickly. They're now lapping a lot faster than they were almost half an hour ago in that terribly wet start.
We're looking at our monitor up here in our little box, and we can see that Bert Schneider's last lap was a 1:54, with the leader Lammers has just gone round in 2 minutes. So obviously the intermediate tyres that have been fitting onto some of the cars are considerably quicker. So we can see the cars who've pitted early, probably the 2 Mercedes, will start to climb back up from the 10th position they're in at the moment towards the front again, and it will be up to the guys up front to come in, either fit the intermediates they need, or if they're going to miss them out, go straight onto the slicks. But at the moment, very much a tactical race, depending on which tyres you want and how many pit stops you need to come in. Pit stop does take a period of time because you've got to slow down, come in through the pit lane and out again.
Championship, and we've just seen the lead change. Jan Lammers for Lotus, who was leading the race, in trouble, and these are now our leaders we're looking at, John Nielsen and Peter Cox. Here is the moment that all went wrong for Jan Lammers, the man who'd been leading the race for the last 4 laps after Alessandro Nannini took his Mercedes into the pits. These are our new leaders, John Nielsen leading for Gulf McLaren from Peter Cox, the Dutchman, at the wheel of his BMW Motorsport McLaren F1 GTR. All these McLarens, the new long-tailed cars, up against the cream of Mercedes, the cream of Porsche. There's confirmation after 15 laps. We're now on lap 16, and look at Hans Stuck and Terry Boutsen. Had such a rotten face in Hockenheim after Stuck crashed on the first lap. He had the ignominy of being lapped by race winners JJ Leto and Steve Soper, now up into 3rd place. And we're expecting at about 50 minutes into this race, maybe a little more with the rain, the first routine fuel stops. David, this rain obviously we had earlier on is going to let them go stretch the fuel window a bit further, isn't it?
Yes, normally these cars flat out on the slick racing tyres around the Silverstone circuit would last approximately 55 minutes to an hour. But with the slightly slower pace and the rain, then they can probably stretch that to about 65 minutes, maybe even towards 70 a little bit. But at the moment it's drying out a little bit, and I think with the change in track conditions, we'll find that most of them will not even make it to the first hour before they're coming in and changing tyres. We've already seen a number of tyre changes already for those from wets to intermediates, and I've got a funny feeling some of the people still out on their wets will be in for slicks fairly soon.
Right, well, at the moment, this is the battle everyone's watching. This is the lead battle. Peter Cox in the FIA BMW Motorsport McLaren, climbing all over the back of John Nielsen. Great battle going on here, and we're looking at the moment for any change in that order. JJ Leto in the other car, he's further down the order. We still don't know what happened to him. He's running in ninth at the moment, but Leto on a charge now, taking fastest lap on 1:53, which David just underlines what you were saying about these guys have already been into the pits now, setting the fastest times.
Yes, with the intermediates, those tyres have got a few less grooves cut in them than the full wet tyres, giving you a little bit more grip onto the circuit, so you can have a lot more grip coming out the corners, through the corners, and they're now looking at something like 8 seconds faster with the intermediate tyre over above the wet tyre that the majority of people are still on.
Well, both these cars are watching at the moment, fighting for the lead. They are on wet tyres, and look at this track, it is really getting quite dry now.
The sun is shining through. We look up at the sky and you can see the wind is blowing very hard. With the wind and the sun, it's drying the circuit extremely quickly, and I've got a funny feeling before the hour is up we're going to see the majority of people in to change their tyres.
Well, just a flash came up then. Bernd Schneider now taking fastest lap of the race with a 1:52.499, so every second it's coming down. Here comes our number 10 car, the number 10 car of... Now they're both in first and second in the race. Nielsen and Cox into the pits. This is the moment that we were just talking about, David.
Yes, we're now 16 laps into the race. We expected to be going an awful lot further before we've seen a routine pit stop. So this will change things dramatically for the teams. They're now going to have to think through the future as to how long a tank full of fuel will last, and to try and stretch it out towards the end of the 4 hours. It will change everyone's thinking, and no doubt the computers will come out and be working overtime. And we see the pit and the car in the pit now being refueled first of all. We've changed now to the Viper. It looks as though it's just about finished, fitting a front wheel there. When that's done, no doubt it'll go out back to the car that was lying second. It's now up in the air, having refueled. They're changing the tyres, cleaning the screen. On the circuit, when it's been raining like this, the screen gets very, very dirty. There we can see the right-hand front wheel being taken off, and a slick tyre. Yep, absolutely slick race tyre going onto the front. So that's the first time we've seen someone fitting slicks. And now the times will start to tumble from the sort of 150 mark, 159 as we've been doing so far, all the way down to the mid-40s. And there's the two cars coming out, and they've changed direction. We've now got John Nielsen in front of Peter Cox, who's now second. Both of them sticking to the speed limit as they're coming out of the pit lane. Once out, accelerating very hard. They've now got slick tyres on. They're going to be very cold, and they're going to be a damp circuit, so they will slither around for quite some time before they get onto the pace.
Well, of course, all this means that the lead has changed now. Pedro Lamy now leading the race for Schubel Porsche, and right behind him, 2.8 seconds behind him, is Ralph Kelleners. Kelleners driving the Rook Racing Porsche 911 GT1. First time this year that, in fact, Porsche have led a GT race. It's only the second race, but it's these are two of the top customer cars, and Peter Cox at the moment shown as third. That's going to change, I'm sure. John Nielsen is fourth, and Chris Goodwin in the Parabolica Motorsport car. You joined us a little bit late after the first lap. We saw him spinning off under coming out of the new section of Abbey, I think it was, down towards Farm, and he has now worked his way back up to 5th place, which is going to become 3rd in just a moment, I'm sure. Looking at the new leader there 3 goes. It's the Schubel car. In fact, Pedro Lamy leading the race at the moment from the car of Ralph Kelleners, and confirmation now on the screens. Chris Goodwin up into 3rd in the Parabolica Motorsport McLaren, the car that won the opening round, incidentally, of the British GT Championship. Pedro Lamy then, our race leader, after 19 laps of this race here. Looking at the moment at the GT2 leader. This, in fact, is the Chamberlain car of Jari Nurminen. It's the first time Hugh Chamberlain has led a race, I think, in quite a long time, leading the GT2 category, running the third of these Vipers. We'll take a short break. Rejoin us on Eurosport in just a moment. Eurosport at Silverstone, who join us at the exact moment the lead of the race has changed again. About the fifth lead change in this extraordinary wet-dry race at the moment. We're nearly 40 minutes into the second round of the FIA GT World Championship, and that man there, having just lost the lead, he's about to lose second place as well. That was Pedro Lamy in the blue and white Porsche there, losing second place now to Bernd Schneider, because the lead has now been taken by JJ Leto for BMW Motorsport McLaren. Leto, the man who won at Hockenheim together with Steve Soper in the opening round. Leto driving then with measles, and Steve Soper, who's going to be driving that car now in the lead, has a severe dose of flu this weekend. Just having a look again in slow motion at that passing move. Very, very nice move as they come down. Which section of the track is that, David? Tell us.
That's just coming into the Vale corner. Very, very tight left-hand corner. Then opens out into Club, which is a long right-hand corner, accelerating out, and there's the leader Pedro Lamy that we had, now going into the pit lane to change his wet tyres onto slick tyres, as the leaders now have. We've now got Leto in the lead with his slick-shod BMW McLaren car, and Schneider behind him, some 4 seconds behind, and those two now putting in some very quick times, and I think the whole race will start to speed up very much at the moment.
Well, these Porsches, of course, the 911 GT1, when it came out last year, absolutely shocked the whole of the GT world. The car was so far ahead. Everyone said it's a Group C car. Now the customers have got the cars. They've lost quite a lot of power, as much as 60 brake horsepower, Porsche is saying, and they've been struggling, haven't they?
Yes, Porsche are struggling with the power they've got. The rules for the championship state that we have to have restrictors in for the engines, and those restrictors have knocked that 60 horsepower off the Porsches, and in doing so they've slowed them down so much. So instead of being the car to win with last year, it's now a car that's struggling compared with the leading cars this year.
Well, it's just confirmation of the top 6 after 20 laps. It's Leto for McLaren, Schneider for Mercedes, Lamy, that'll change in a minute, Kellner's, that'll change in a minute, because I'm sure Kellner's is heading pitward as well. Chris Goodwin and Gary Earls doing a great job there in that Parabolica Motorsport car. The car, in fact, which is going to be racing at Le Mans with Japanese drivers this year. And we're just looking at another changer. Bruno Eichmann now leading GT2 in the Porsche. And Porsche might have a power reduction in GT1, David, but they've got their power back in GT2. They've been allowed last year's restrictors back after struggling so much at Hockenheim.
Yes, I think because they were so far off the pace, Porsche did appeal to the governing body to say that they were being unfairly treated, and the governing body did listen, and they have altered the restrictors back to last year's, and that is giving them a much better chance at trying to do something within the GT2 category, and so they're now back up there vying for the lead, which they weren't able to do at the last meeting.
Well, in fact, that's changed even as we're talking. The Chamberlain Viper takes the lead again of GT2. There's a great battle going on there. And Juri Nurminen in the 53 car and the 54 car. So Nurminen for Chamberlain and also Peter Hardman for Chamberlain there. Great battle going on between the Vipers, and Bruno Eichmann knocked down to third. I think he's probably heading pitwards unless something happened we didn't see there on the screen.
Yeah, we're able to look at another little screen that tells us the individual lap times, and Peter Hardman, the first of the GT2 cars, is going around some 7 seconds faster than the rest of them. So we take it, or we will take an educated guess that he's now been in and changed his tyres, whereas the rest are probably still running around on wets. So the GT2 cars being a bit slower than the leaders coming in for their dry tyres, but they will be in fairly shortly.
So JJ Leto back where he likes to be most, the man leading the race at the moment and carving his way through a lot of GT2 back markers. Now he's coming up behind Pedro Lamy's car, which is now out of the pits, and at this point we are going over the pits to have talk to Martin Hayden.
Yeah, Lammers, problems with the Lotus?
Yeah, we think something like an input shaft has broken. It's not a problem we've had before, but we're very, very pleased that at least the race pace is coming, so we're making good progress. It's a shame.
Now listen, everybody else has gone on to slicks. That's the right move at this time as the track dries, don't you think?
I think so. I think it would have been just a couple of laps before we would have come in, but anyway, we're pleased. I think these guys are fantastic. They work very hard, and if we keep making the progress, we'll get our shot later in the season.
So Jan Lammers, problems with the Lotus, but the race continues for both the cars.
So thank you, Martin Haven, down there in the pits, and looking at our race leader still, JJ Leto, who's leading from Bernd Schneider now by 10 seconds, stretching it out. Leto on slicks, as we saw, and Schneider, we think, probably wets rather than intermediates, David. Is that correct?
Schneider, no, I do believe that he's had his intermediates. He's running around in the 150s, whereas if you're in wet, you're running in it round about 2 minutes dead. So he's losing something like 4 seconds to the leader at the moment, each lap. And the other two cars behind, Nielsen's now also on about a 1 minute 50 lap, so he's will be catching, I would think, Schneider, although he's a long way behind on the circuit. He will be catching at something about 4 seconds a lap, and the rest of the people, I think most of them after that, have now changed onto slicks. So I think Schneider will drop down with another pit stop fairly shortly, but making it extremely interesting.
Yeah, and in fact now only 7 cars that have not been lapped out of these 47 cars that started the race. Such is the pace of these front runners, and JJ Leto, such an experienced man who has been a winner at Hockenheim just a few weeks ago. He won Le Mans in 1955, of course, for McLaren. He gave McLaren its first ever Le Mans victory. He went on then to race with Gulf last year. He had a great success in Suzuka with Ray Bellem and James Weaver during Gulf's championship year. And the man really doing such a good job for McLaren this year. 1995-96, he raced in ITC with Opel. And of course, 62 Grand Prix behind him. That mustn't be forgotten. So a long and honourable career, but he's really found his niche in sports car racing now. So JJ Leto, the man from Finland, who incidentally will be really pushing to win in his home race in 2 weeks' time at Helsinki in the streets. And that's some race, David. Quite a change from Silverstone.
Yes, at Silverstone here we have a very fast circuit, a very wide, very open circuit, and they're going to go from this, what I would say, top-class international circuit to Helsinki, which is a fantastic place, but it is very much a street circuit. We're back into the pits now. We can see one of the Mercedes in, and the driver's getting out. The second driver, you can see, just waiting to get in there. They're refueling as we are talking. Refueling finished, so the car will go up in there. There it goes on the air jacks. Off come the wheels. We can see the intermediates coming off and the slick tyres going on. So the Mercedes was extremely quick in qualifying. So we can see that once it rejoins the circuit, it really will start to carve its way through the people in front and back towards the lead, hopefully.
Yeah, so Bernd Schneider at the moment strapping in his young teammate there. Alexander Wirtz, the man who won Le Mans last year for US Porsche. He's been snatched up by Mercedes, one of their junior team drivers. Out he goes, and Bernd Schneider there watching his young protege driving out. And so 2 stops within the hour. This is going to cost a lot of time, I think, for Mercedes. Was this a good move or a bad move? We're not going to find out until the race unwraps.
I think when we started and they changed to intermediates, that was a good move because that put them back to the top of the leaderboard. Unfortunately, everyone else has stuck to their slicks and stuck to their wets, I should say, until it was necessary. And
from Alessandro Nannini and Ray Bellem and Andrew Bilsett-Scott, who's in the car at the moment, 5th at the moment for Gulf McLaren. Well, I've got next to me David Leslie. David, you had a very good 3rd place here just a couple of weeks ago in the British Touring Car Championships. That's still fresh in your mind on this circuit, huh?
yes, it is. This circuit's been completely resurfaced since last year, ready for the Grand Prix in July, and it's very smooth, and they're happy to suit our Nissan car very well. So I've come here looking at what's happening and thoroughly enjoyed what I did a fortnight ago.
So, David, obviously, of course, you had a long and honourable career in sports car racing, all those years with Group C racing, Group C2 with Kyrgios, Aston Martin, then a number of times with Jaguar. Now you're with Nissan again. It's looking at some of these cars, this Mercedes, and I'm sure you've seen pictures of the new Nissan Group C car, did I say? GT car that's going to race at Le Mans. They are getting back towards these Group C days, aren't they?
Yes, they are. It started off very much as a GT car. The car you bought in the showroom was modified to go racing, and that's how it started out. But nowadays, Porsche came in last year with their nice new car, and it went very, very quick. And the other manufacturers have moved forward over the winter. You see how well McLaren are going now with their BMW powered car. It won the first race. It's leading this race quite handsomely at the moment with something like over 50-second gap over the second person. And Mercedes have come out just at the first race with their new car. It was so quick it was on pole position here at Silverstone. And yeah, very much looking like the old Group C cars. But don't forget, you can buy these cars and put them on the road. You have to have an awful lot of money, and how you would insure them, I'm not quite too sure. But they're an interesting piece of kit.
And I think if you want a Mercedes, you have to have an awful lot of influence as well.
Yes, I understand, talking to them yesterday, that they're only going to make somewhere between 5 and 7 road-going versions this year, and it will be very much a limited car.
Okay, well, sorry, David, just to interrupt you for a moment. We're going down to the pits to join Martin Haven, who's got Bernd Schneider with him.
Bernd Schneider, good fun out there.
Not so much, because the conditioning is changing all the time, and in the beginning was really wet, and we put rain tires on, and then the circuit dried up very quickly. We put in the medians on, and now it's completely dry, but the dark clouds comes back, and I think we'll have rain again.
The McLarens are on slick tyres, most of the others are on slicks as well. Was intermediates the right choice?
No, I think it was wrong. We had to wait another 2 laps to put the slicks straight away on. But anyway, this is a kind of experience we have to collect, and next time we know it.
So 3 hours still to go, the Mercedes fighting for the lead all the way.
Thank you, Martin. Well, we're back here watching our race leader at the moment, JJ Lato. Bernd Schneider, there, of course, 1995 DTM and ITC champion for Mercedes. He's been a Mercedes man for a long, long time now. Of course, one of their major assets in this race program. David, we were just problem there. Did you see that? Was that a lock-up for the Mercedes? Someone going off there?
The Mercedes was straight across the gravel trap. We can see it now coming back onto the circuit. I think something happened at the rear of the car. Maybe he went in just a little bit too fast, and rather than spin the car, thought it was much easier to drive it straight through the gravel trap and out the other side. That way he can keep going and lose his butt a couple of places. And he will carry on and hopefully complete this 4-hour race.
This is Alexander Wurz at the wheel, 23 years old. He's the Austrian driver who, as we said earlier, won Le Mans in 1996. He's also vice champion in the 94 German Formula 3 Championship. And that championship, which we brought on Eurosport a lot, was run in rain a lot of the time. So you think Alex would be a bit more circumspect?
Yes, unfortunately, once the driver gets into a car, then you believe that you can be the fastest person out there, and you try that much harder. And you would think, yes, these drivers would take care. They're driving very expensive machinery. They would like to keep it in one piece. They would like to get to the finish to try and finish in the top 3 or whatever. But once you're out there, you try very, very hard. You put everything into it, and you try and brake as late as possible, try and beat the person in front. It doesn't matter whether he's a lap down. You want to always pass whoever's in front, and these are the sort of effort you put into it, and sometimes you get it just not quite right. And what you see on the TV just a second ago was what happens. A bit of a slip up and off you go. Luckily, he was straight through the gravel trap and out the other side and didn't get buried in it.
David, we were just talking with you a minute ago about the new circuit here. A lot of the work you can see there, the grass hasn't grown yet over the work they've done over the winter. How much of this circuit did you use in the touring cars 2 weeks ago?
We used the majority of it. We used what we call the international circuit. It uses a start and finish all the way up to the Beckett's complex. We then turn right off that circuit, off the Grand Prix circuit, and join down at the Abbey corner. Back onto the Grand Prix circuit. It just cuts the circuit in half, basically. We then come from Abbey through the bridge corner and back into the complex, which we know as Priory, Brooklands and Luffield.
Well, they've done, of course, a big resurfacing job as well. How long does this tarmac stay green, before it really is good for racing?
It doesn't stay green very long, because this circuit is used all the time. Not only do we have such fantastic races like the GT here on the circuit, but we have a lot of testing. A lot of the Formula 1 teams come here, the GT teams, touring car teams, etc., and the circuit's in use most of the week.
It's certainly a good, nice little comparison here. Here's the new McLaren leading the old one, the Gert Rouge Sandy Grau car just behind. This was the car that was bought from Fabien Giroir from last year's Frank Muller team. So not a lot of changes looking front on, except that front wing has gone wide. This shot is the difference, so that long tail and these flared side panels to the car. It really is quite a different car, isn't it?
Yes, when you first look at it, it looks very much the same car. It's only when you look at it side on, you realise just how much longer the new car is than the older one. And once you get into the car and discover the changes to the chassis and the suspension, then you find out the car is very different. And this year's car is very much quicker than last year's. And as we've just seen on the TV, you know, that he's been able to go past last year's car and simply drive away from it and drive away very quickly.
Well, while watching Leto circulating, David, just a quick word. You won 2 races for Honda last year in the British Touring Car Championship. You must be getting close to a win with the Nissan now, eh?
Yes, the Nissan started with a brand new car this year, and in only our second race meeting we had a 3rd, in the first race meeting we had a 4th, and the last one we've had another 4th. So we're knocking on that door of being on that top step of the winners' podium. So I think it'll be fairly soon. Brands Hatch is our next race next weekend, and we were there testing, and we were 3rd quickest on Friday. So we're looking forward to that win very soon.
Good. Well, we can see for ourselves after 28 laps, Leto from Cox, from Nielsen, from Nannini, who I think is still in the car, from Andrew Gilbert-Scott, and from Alexander Wurz there, driving that Mercedes. Silverstone, the rain has returned with a vengeance, and we have got a lot of the leading cars now heading for the pits. In fact, in comes the 27 Parabolica car, and people are going to be in all sorts of trouble now. They're on slick tires, remember, and there is a huge downpour. And this is perhaps one of the most exciting parts of the race, but we're going to be leaving you just for a short time, so we'll be back on Eurosport a little later in the afternoon. Join us then.
Comes the centre of feverish activity. Back into the pits comes the number 9 car, Peter Cox into the pits for wets, and Roberto Ravalia taking the car over now. The pit crew is being asked to work overtime in this race as the weather conditions proving to be totally unpredictable. Out of the pits comes Chris Goodwin, lying in 8th position. And Pedro Lamy, having been one of the last to change onto slicks tyres, has to come back in for wets. Just about everybody coming into the pits for wet tyres, not prepared to risk staying out there on slicks. It's just far too wet at this stage. Leto coming in and handing the car over to Steve Soper at this point as well. Steve Soper jumping into the car and back out onto the circuit for the number 8 car. Steve Soper now leading the race, but having a bit of a tough weekend. Steve suffering from a trapped nerve in his back and suffering from flu as well. Not an easy weekend for him, but Soper at the moment in the lead of the race from Alessandro Nannini in the Mercedes in 2nd position. GT2, the Sila Spinelli Nern Porsche is leading from the Gash Beretta Viper, with Hurtgen, Eichmann and Amarin in 3rd, and Justin Bell going well in 4th place in the other of the Vipers. So Steve Soper continuing to lead. Meanwhile, Nannini in 2nd position. A little bit of a gap back to Alessandro Nannini at this point. Soper looking pretty good out front. There's the Parabolica McLaren of Chris Goodwin and Gary Ailes, who won the British round of the Sports Car Championship to open up the season and dominated that race here at Silverstone. And the decision made to really go fully international and proving to be very, very competitive as well. Chasing after Nannini, not in fact for position, but to unlap himself from the Mercedes. And it looks as though he's heading to do that. The Mercedes slithering around a lot in these conditions, and the Goodwin Ailes car able to go through. And where Nannini lying in 2nd place from Steve Soper, but the rain just falling again a little bit, and the wiper working hard on the Mercedes as Nannini tries to keep an eye on where he's actually trying to go. But coming back into the complex, and suddenly more drama because Steve Soper has gone off in this section of the track. He's off in the gravel trap at the left-hander at Brooklands. There he is, the record already there to turn away. So that means Nannini takes over the lead of the race. And Steve Soper, who had a very comfortable lead over the Mercedes here, just being caught out by these conditions, as so many drivers have here, and putting it out into the gravel. Hopefully they'll be able to get the car back out again, but for the moment it means that Mercedes are once again in front. Well, they had a difficult debut at Hockenheim with not either car lasting very long. And Schneider car running into brake problems, and this car having electrical troubles later on in the race. But this one working quite well for them at the moment, and the reliability certainly seems to be there. They've had a while to work on the car while everyone else has been busy at Le Mans trying to qualify for the 24-hour race to be held in June. Gash still leads in the GT2 class as the sun comes out and a dry line begins to develop again, just to mess up the team's plans once more. Nini leading from Ravalia. Soper has recovered to third. Bashir in the Nielsen car now. Alexander Wurz in the Schneider Mercedes. And then Bob Volek teamed up with Pedro Lamy. They're the number 1 Gulf McLaren of Andrew Gilbert Scott. And battling fairly closely, not too far away, is Chris Goodwin's McLaren. Just in the background there, with the Lotus between the two of them. Up front is not all going so easily for Nannini, who now has 2 McLarens right behind him, the 2 Schnitzer cars of Soper and Ravalia. And Nannini is not going to be able to hold out the 2 McLaren BMWs for very much longer. Again, it's a 3-way tussle for the lead. And after a good part of this race, it's amazing to see just how evenly matched and how close the front runners are. Nannini can't hold on much longer. Lap number 42, and both of the McLarens go past. So Steve Soper back ahead with Roberto Ravalia in second place. Nannini back to third position. But the track still getting that little bit drier. Into the pits, the number 9 car of Peter Cox and Roberto Ravalia. And it's time to switch on to slick tyres once again. The fuel goes aboard, and the mechanics wait patiently for that fueling process to be completed before getting the guns, the air guns, onto the tyres. They're the slick tyres ready to go on the front. A limited number of people are allowed to work on the car, so they have to change the rears first. Also into the pits is Alessandro Nannini, making a change at the same time, and in fact handing the car over to Marcel Thiemann as well, the guy who raced in the Formula 3 Championship in Germany last year. It's a good effect, and now driving with Mercedes in the Championship. Steve Soper into the pits as well for slick tyres, the number 8 car. And meanwhile, Chris Goodwin now lying in third place for the Parabolica team. Great performance this in the face of true international opposition. Ravalia leading, Soper second, Goodwin in third place, as you can see, from Nannini, Raffanel and Dalmas. So Ravalia and Cox sharing the car up front, but an accident for Yannick Dalmas in the Porsche. Another of the GT1 cars going off with another rain shower, just catching the drivers out when they're on slick tyres, the rain beginning to fall again, and the car Yannick Dalmas sharing with Ralph Kellener's off against the wall. And there's been damage as well to Cor Euser in the Marcos, out of the GT2 category. So more drivers getting into trouble as once again the weather conditions throwing a spanner in the works here. Taking another look, and there in the background you can just see, well, it was a fairly hefty whack. He managed to find the tyre barrier, but nonetheless has done a fair bit of damage to the back of the Porsche. Oyser tries to bring the Marcos without its front bodywork back to the pit safely. The rear wing also having been pushed over in the accident. And the rain really beginning to fall once again. Just when it all looks as though it's all settling down, the rain comes down and it just becomes a lottery once again. Roberto Ravalia is the race leader. Ravalia sharing that car with Peter Cox, remember, the veteran touring car driver Ravalia, and the slippery surface flag coming out. Well, it looks pretty slippery with the amount of rain falling at the moment. Absolutely appalling conditions. And the deluge just meaning that visibility is reduced and rivers beginning to form across the circuit in various places as well. Ravalia having to really tiptoe in these conditions to stay out there at all. And how about this? One of the most experienced drivers and a brilliant driver in the wet, Hans Stuck, even he can't get it right in these conditions. Still executes a beautiful spin and doesn't lose too much time. With all this changes going on and cars coming to the pits once again, it means that Chris Goodwin has now taken over the lead of the race. Sunshine in some parts, rain in other parts. Cars into and out of the pits, changes going on all of the time. And the net result at the moment is the number 27 car of Chris Goodwin and Gary Ailes is in the lead of the race. So the positions at this point in the race see Goodwin ahead of the Gulf McLaren of Gilbert Scott and Raffanel. Nannini in third now, Schneider in fourth, the two Mercedes. Then Cox Ravalia cars drop down to fifth, ahead of the Soper Leto car in sixth position. Still, the weather hasn't told the full story though, and there's still some way to go in the race. Can Goodwin stay up there, or are the others going to come back at him? Find out after the break. And ready to hand the car over to Gary Ailes as the sunshine tries to poke its way through again at Silverstone in the second round of the FIA GT Series. A race of changing fortunes, but these two British drivers have done a great job in this car. Much less experienced in the GT Series than most of the opposition, but both of them with great backgrounds, both of them with a lot of touring car racing experience. Gary Ailes raced in the British Touring Car Championship in a Rouse-run Nissan Primera last year. Before that, he raced a lot in the Italian Touring Car Championship for Peugeot as a works driver. Chris Goodwin also with a lot of touring car experience, although never quite getting the full works drive that he seeked, but now with this great opportunity with the Parabolica McLaren. But that car into the pits, and that means that Pierre-Henri Raffanel is now in the lead of the race with the Gulf McLaren, driving with Andrew Gilbert-Scott. Ray Bell standing down from this car after the accident to Jean-Marc Gounon in the other car in the morning warm-up. And Raffanel now leading the race, but just really wondering what on earth the weather's going to throw at him next. Picking his way through the back markers of the slightly slower, somewhat slower GT2 cars. Part and parcel of GT racing to deal with the slower cars as smoothly as possible. Ratanaku Prutiratov in the Lotus Elise, the car shared with Maurizio Sandro Sala. And that looks beached across the curb. As Marcel Thiemann comes into the pits with the car being shared with Alessandro Nannini, and Thiemann reporting gear change problems. So it looks as though that car is out of the race. Still the other Mercedes in the race of Bernd Schneider and Alexander Wurz. And indeed, that car is going extremely well at this point. Marcel Thiemann, though, explaining to the mechanics what exactly has happened with the gear change, and it does look as though they're not going to be able to do much more with that. Well, there is the other car of Schneider and Wurz, and indeed this car now has taken over the lead. Having got past the Raffanel McLaren, the Schneider-Wurz car, the car that led from pole position at the very start of the race, is now back in front once again. the Cox Ravalia McLaren in third. The Nini Tiemann car shown as fourth, but that is out now, of course, and that puts Goodwin and Ailes back up into fourth position. So Alexander Wurz in this amazing-looking Mercedes that's come onto the scene this year, developed over the latter months of 1996 through the winter and into 97. But just look at the weather conditions all of a sudden, once again, taking a turn for the worse, just as you think things are beginning to improve. The good British weather comes out with another surprise, and Alexander Wurz sliding that car around. The rain beating against the microphones on the cameras. And this as heavy as any rain shower that's been seen in the race so far. Wurz really working hard to keep that thing under control. Meanwhile, going very quickly just behind is Roberto Ravalia in the FIA McLaren BMW. Not fighting for position. He's actually a lap behind, but it looks as though he may well be able to unlap himself at this point from the Mercedes. Look at the Mercedes twitching around. And as Ravalia closing up on more suitable tyres, coming through to unlap himself, Alexander Wurz is having to do everything just to stay on the island. More dramas as the wet conditions catching out other drivers. Rocky Augusta off the road in the Callaway Corvette. Meanwhile, the GT2 class is still being led by the white and blue Viper of Philippe Gache and Olivier Beretta. Up front, Alexander Wurz still leads for Mercedes. With Raffanel in second place, Peter Cox in third, taking over from Ravalia. Gary Ailes in fourth, ahead of Hans Stuck and JJ Leto in sixth place. Into the pits for the race leader then, Alexander Wurz. Time to hand over to Ben Schneider once again. And in this race of changing fortunes, Mercedes now seems to be in pretty good shape. Wurz climbs out, Schneider clambers in to the tight cockpit of the CLK, but it's raining. What a surprise. Once again, the rain just sheeting down. As Pierre-Henri Raffanel, now the race leader in one of the Gulf McLarens, tries to pick his way through the puddles. More troubles. The number 53 car of Hugenholtz being caught out by the conditions. And he's not the only one. There are many cars at this stage in the race being caught out. A replay of what happened to Hugenholtz as he spun on the straight there and actually managed to hit the bridge. And other cars around the track as well. The Sina Spinelli Robert Nern Porsche off in the gravel trap. And the poor old marshals struggling valiantly to get it out of there. And the K. Owen Piper Mustang as well into the gravel trap. There's an absolute river of water coming out of Club and also through Woodcote Corner. As the number 54 Viper of Peter Hardman makes its way into the pits. Dreadful conditions, and the track getting worse by the moment, worse than it has been throughout the race so far, and the yellow flags flying for all the cars off around the circuit. The officials therefore deciding to bring out the safety car. Understandably enough, with these conditions, decided that it's not safe to run the cars at racing speed. The safety car out there now to bring everyone to heel and try and wait for, hopefully, some slightly better weather conditions to prevail. Gives a chance for the marshals to try and get all of those beached cars out of trouble. Pedro Lamy, one of those as well, former race leader in the Porsche. The teams being warned of the safety car and its presence on the circuit, and the cars dutifully lining up astern of the safety car. Some 35 cars of 47 that started the race still running. So the Peter Cox, Roberto Ravalia McLaren at the head of the queue there, and the leader of the race when the safety car came out. No doubt hoping for the race to be called at this point, but with a lot of discussion going on about whether to restart the race or not. A bit of a chance given for the circuit to drain a little bit after that extremely heavy rain shower, and the race officials deciding that it was possible to restart the race once all of the stricken cars had been cleared away to safety. So the safety car with its lights off coming into the pits, and the race restarted after some 20 minutes of slowly following the safety car around. Peter Cox forging his way ahead once again, but the rest of them fairly slow away, but Peter Cox very nearly getting caught out immediately by that river flooding across the Woodcote corner. The green flag being waved, everyone else very slow in responding to that, but given the conditions, perhaps truly understandable. Some of the GT2 cars picking their way through very carefully. Peter Cox able to escape up front. But having to tread very gingerly indeed to avoid the worst of the puddles, and to avoid simply aquaplaning straight off the road. The amount of water being thrown up by the car at various points on the track just indicating how difficult the conditions were at this stage. So the Cox leading after 85 laps, but Bernd Schneider was on the charge behind him in second place. Gary Ailes and Chris Goodwin running in third ahead of Leto and Soper. Car in fourth, the Stuck & Boots and Porsche in fifth place. Peter Cox, that initial lead after the safety car came out, being gradually eroded by a storming drive from Bernd Schneider in the Mercedes. Schneider certainly wasn't making it look easy, and nor was Cox in his attempt to stay ahead. Schneider gradually closing up the gap. Sliding through the left-hander at Priory, Peter Cox. All his car control being tested to the maximum in his attempt to keep this V12 engined McLaren on the road safely. Schneider in much the same situation with the Mercedes, but still closing the gap up. This is a tricky part of the circuit. The car's accelerating normally flat out through here, but with the puddles around, even there they're having to feather the throttle, and even on the straights it's not a question of being flat out and hard up through the gears. In these conditions, everything having to be done so gingerly and carefully to avoid upsetting the car and putting it into a spin. Schneider now beginning to look for a way past Peter Cox to take the lead of this race. Through Beckett's. Looking one way and the other. Looking for visibility as much as anything, as following in the plume of spray behind the McLaren means that he just goes into a wall of water. And now Schneider looking to get past the McLaren, running down towards Stowe Corner, absolutely side by side these two, in appalling conditions, just a few feet apart. Schneider trying to go right round the outside into Stowe Corner, and he makes it round the outside, gets past Peter Cox. Great piece of overtaking from Schneider, brave move, trying to find a little bit more grip perhaps on the outside of the corner, and more thankfully for him perhaps finding a bit of clear space, but out of Woodcote, and a car has gone off in a big way. Sandy Grau has crashed in the Ruch McLaren. Sandy Grau clambering out of the car, he's unhurt, but the back of the car very badly damaged. Let's take another look at this. He came out of Luffield, going into Woodcote, hit the river though, and the car just swapped ends and into the barrier on the outside. Well, not long after that, around comes Olivier Beretta, hits the same patch of water, and he goes off in exactly the same place and touches the back of the McLaren as well. Debris all over the place, both cars off into the gravel trap, and the red flag is brought out. Finally, the race is called to a halt. Enough is enough. The weather conditions have proved beyond endurance, and the red flag is brought out, and everybody thinks that Bernd Schneider has won the race. He got past the McLaren of Peter Cox, but it's not to be. The race result is taken from 2 laps before, and that means that the victory goes to Peter Cox and Roberto Ravalia, who were leading at that point, and therefore they take victory in round 2 of the FIA GT Series here at Silverstone after a traumatic race, a race that saw so many turning fortunes, but they were there when it counted, and the win goes to Peter Cox and Roberto Ravalia. So Schnitzer win again, although it's their other car this time. Schneider reverts in 2nd place ahead of Leto and Soper, the winners of Hockenheim, finishing in 3rd position here. 4th place for Andrew Gilbert-Scott and Pierre-Henri Raffanel. Stucken Boutsen finishing in 5th, and an excellent 6th position for Chris Goodwin and Gary Ailes. The other survivors, and they're in 8th place, and winner of the GT2 category, Justin Bell and Tommy Archer in their Viper. End of the race though, and a chance to speak to the race winner, Peter Cox.
Yes, it was for everybody very hard, I think, with the change of weather and everything. For me, it was an unbelievable call that they restarted the race, because the track was in no way in any condition to restart. It was very, very dangerous, and I can still not believe it. The pace car puts out his lights and I cannot follow the pace car speed. So I could not believe what was happening, and it was really, I'm glad nobody's really hurt, I think, because it was really bad.
So in your opinion, there should have been a stop at the end of the race?
Well, I think also to their own opinion, because they stopped it then after 2 laps, which they saw it was not possible to do. But I think the people in the pace car should have told the clerk of the course that the track was in no way in condition to race.
Bernd Schneider, a very difficult race for everybody, and a very confusing end.
That's right, we thought we had won the race, but it looked like that we haven't. But anyway, it was the right decision to stop this race, because the car was more swimming than on the road, and was the right decision.
We just knew that if we could stay on, and Tommy did a great job in the first 2 hours. I did, you know, I had a good first 40 minutes, and then it was survival for the next half an hour. And as Tommy said earlier to someone, it was purely right place, right time, and we had the right tyres. That was a call that the team took, and Orica did a great job. So, I mean, you can't ask for much more than that.
Justin Bell, suitably delighted to take his first major international win at Silverstone in the GT2 category. But for Peter Cox and Roberto Ravalia, they could celebrate the overall win in the GT1 class for the Schnitzer McLaren BMW. A remarkable race then, a race of attrition to a certain extent, but the McLaren survived and the Mercedes was second. We'll be bringing you more GT racing throughout the year.